employment law is changing daily, massive layoffs.
They don't have the means to do it.
We could top up their wage with government funding assistance, but then we have ownership of those people, do we not?
Incentive for me to do that. And when we do open up, they've been paid to do nothing. Now they're being paid the same.
How do we scale these people back in?
There is a very good chance, plenty of litigation. Dentists are targeted.
Is costing me money, and it's paying them, rewarding them for not doing anything. I feel like it's all focused on employees. Nothing's being focused on the actual employer. Like, we're opening up a door that we may not be able to close later on.
Let's get them paid through their employer, are ready to go back to work. You know, you have to change it.
Well, we do have to change. We actually have to actually go to work. That's the big change.
Guys, let me jump in. Okay, so I feel like I'm watching this awesome tennis match.
I'm looking very, very pale. Everyone, I promise I'm not this pale in real life.
Jonathan, the Vampire Slayer.
Can you make me look more tan?
COVID tan.
I want to welcome you back to Leadership in Times of Crisis. Today we are focusing on employment law post-COVID, or some of the challenges you might be thinking about right now or considering and percolating in your brains on how you're going to process them and deal with them going back after this pandemic has finally released us and allowed us back to work. And I'm here with Dr. Agatha Bis, as always, and attorney Jonathan Borrelli. Jonathan, I'll get you to give us a brief introduction and background about yourself, and then we're going to jump right into this because I know our dental community has got a lot of questions that on top of mind, especially when it focuses on employment law.
Of course, no, and thank you very much for having me. So my name is Jonathan. I'm an employment lawyer with Kaiser Mason Ball in Mississauga, and primarily I've been helping employers, and especially during this time, helping a lot of employers, and including dentists, with a lot of their concerns and questions and strategies during this period. So I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions you have about navigating this time that we're in.
And good afternoon, Dr. Bis. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Agatha Bis. I own a practice in Oakville. Well, I'm in it now and I'm all alone. And thanks, Jonathan, for joining us for this informative chat. I know there's been a lot of questions around how to come back and how to do it properly and how to make sure we, maintain good relationships with our team. So I think that I sort of want to address a few things that we're hearing from various dentists, moving forward.
Yeah, and I've got lots of questions, so I'm happy to answer your questions. Exactly. And so happy to answer any questions now or in the future.
Yeah, Jonathan, right now there's this massive uncertainty because as we watch the news and we hear our social media feeds, it seems like employment law is changing daily, along with everything that's going on with us. The government comes out with new mandates and then new things that are going to be put into place. Maybe you could bring us up to speed on what's happening in real time right now. That could be different in a week or so from now, but some of the things that you're seeing and hearing that apply, especially to our dental community, who've had to do massive layoffs literally across the country.
Yeah, no, my head has been spinning with all of the changes that have been happening. And dentists know in 2018, the employment law changed significantly, but we had a heads up for that. And of course, in 2019, it all changed back, right? So I thought that was pretty quick. And nowadays, it's about every week there is, at the end of March, it was every day there was a new change. And so, every day, even today, there are new announcements being made that affect employers or employees. So employment law is changing very fast. I think the most important thing on the minds of employers right now is the wage subsidy. So it's the Canadian, it's the wage subsidy. And essentially what it is, it's the government will insure 75% of an employee's wage, or up to a maximum of about $847 a week for each employee. And so it's something that I've been helping lots of employers with, including some dentists, because this is the way for the government to ensure that people don't have to be laid off. So the government is saying they will pay 75% of an employee's wage to that maximum amount, $847, and it's only up to the employer to pay the to the remaining 25%, or they, ideally the employer should be paying, the employees full compensation if they're able to. And really the government said they have to be giving best efforts to pay that. And so the way that it's being implemented, of course, there are conditions and there are rules around that. So I've been helping dentists and employers with managing that and getting ready for when the applications are open.
So you've got 75%, and they're encouraging, but not mandatory, to pay the other 25.
So far, what the government has said is, at a minimum, you have to top up the 25%.
Oh, you
so
do?
That would be approximately the full compensation per year would be $58,250. So
Okay,
if your employee makes less than that amount,
yeah,
then the government will pay the 75% of that full amount.
Yeah.
And then the employer has to top up about $200 some odd a week.
So essentially, like, what is the incentive for me to do that? I mean, like, essentially you'd be paying your people full amount of money to do nothing. So then when we do open up, they've been paid to do nothing. Now they're being paid the same to potentially work even harder because we may have some issues coming back. What would be the incentive for an employer to actually do this?
Quick question, Jonathan, I'm going to add to that because if we're topping off these employees and they're sitting at home and then we come back to work and the scale of work isn't there, are we then obligated to bring them back full time? Whereas the other train of thought would be to scale up slowly as business reaches its capacity again. So I think maybe that's a two-pointed question.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start with the second.
So you need water.
I know. I have some here. So I'll start with the second question first. So
Which one was that?
That was the layoff question.
Okay.
So when you're laying off employees, it's risky. Okay. It's always, in even some of the best cases, it's risky. Unless there's some specific language in an employment contract that you have, it's risky, laying off an employee. And I've been helping employers with that. So when you're bringing back those employees, layoffs have to do with whether there's enough work for the employee to do. So if there isn't any work for one certain employee to do, if you know that your schedule is going to be full for one op but not two ops, you're not required to bring back every single employee at the end of whatever layoff or when you're opening your business. So a layoff has to do with what work is available to do. If there's work for everyone, if there's the same volume of work, and you need someone, what the layoff does, it protects their job. So you can't hire someone else to do their job. You have an obligation to recall that employee back to work. But if the work isn't there, then you don't have to recall them immediately. Okay, and back to the first question in terms of what is the incentive for employers to pay, let's say, for a dentist, they've had to lay off their employees and they're considering doing this wage subsidy. Well, it's the government saying they want to help employees. They want to help employees during this unprecedented time. And so for an employer who, actually, the most important thing in all of this is whether there's cash flow. I know for a lot of dentists and a lot of other businesses, they don't have the means to, even if they wanted to participate in the wage subsidy, they don't have the means to do it. So it's the government trying to say, let's not get employees on EI. Let's not get them on the CERB or
let's get them on our bill instead.
Right. So it's the government saying, let's use the existing payroll of these thousands or millions of workers in Canada. Instead of having them being processed through EI, let's have them processed through the employer's payroll. And we will pay, essentially it's just about the same amount of EI. It's slightly higher for EI. Let's get the employers to pay them. And, there are other benefits too for employers, as long as there's a revenue drop. And that's one of the important conditions of accepting the wage subsidy. You have to be able to show a revenue drop. There are some of the payroll deductions that the government will reimburse if you participate in the wage subsidy.
Okay. You know what?
still,
Go ahead.
it still doesn't answer the question of why I would be motivated to do this versus stay as is and at least protect myself in the sense that when we do come back and I can't have everybody on payroll, or the issue of actually, putting a full day's work when, it's been Netflix working out and chilling out. I
Yeah.
mean, my biggest worry at doing this, and not to sound, so aggressive, but the reality is that bringing somebody back on right now with a subsidy is costing me money that I already don't have.
Yeah.
And it's paying them, rewarding them for not doing anything. I feel like like everything that we're hearing, the unemployment payouts and the wage subsidy is all focused on employees. Nothing's being focused on the actual employer. Like, I'm not getting any benefit here. I'm not getting any more money to do this. And I feel like we're opening up a door that we may not be able to close later on. And that's my biggest fear for most dentists who are actually entertaining this. Instead of just sitting quietly, let things play out. Let's find out how we're coming back and then make these decisions.
So what I could say is, first of all, the government has announced that there is more support for employers coming up.
Okay.
And that was just recently announced in terms of commercial rent and some other supports for employers. And I think, the important thing to keep in mind
Talk to my landlord.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what was announced.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's important to keep in mind the government. I mean, these things are happening at breakneck speed, and the government is behind the scenes probably scrambling to get all these things ready.
Yeah.
So in terms of the wage subsidy, I completely hear you. If there's no cash flow, I mean, as an employer, would a dentist be, if they wanted to participate in the wage subsidy, there might be a situation where the dentist would have to take out a loan to pay the employees now and pay interest on that loan and then get it reimbursed by the government sometime later. Applications for this wage subsidy are not even open yet. Okay. So it's a little, it's a little more complicated than how I'm making it sound. And so there are more details, there's more conditions related to it. But overall, it's the government saying, let's keep people off EI, not accepting the $2,000 a month benefit. Let's get them paid through their employer so that when you are ready to go back to work, you don't even have to change anything. You can just keep paying them.
Well, we do have to change. We actually have to actually go to work. That's the big change.
Exactly.
Let me jump in. Guys, let me jump in. Okay, so
okay.
I feel like I'm watching this awesome tennis match. Aggie, so to your point, Aggie, and a number of doctors have asked me this question as well, Jonathan. We've got these people that we could potentially top up their wage with the government funding assistance, but then we have ownership of those people, do we not? That's my first part of the question. Yeah. And then the second question is this sort of forced layoff that we've all been put, is in our backyard right now. That's going to run out at a certain period of time.
Yeah. What if we're off for 6 months?
Yeah. And so, or if you come back, how do we scale these people back in and not fall into a point where everyone's being sued for some type of wrongful dismissal? So I'm just throwing stuff at both of you that I'm hearing from the dental community as well. And to Agatha's point, absolutely. What do you take ownership of that person and you have to bring them back full the day this thing gets the green light, and then you own them even if you're not at capacity, and you take on that full payroll?
So, like I mentioned before, with any layoffs or changing, the employer being forced to change terms of employment, it's always risky, right? So right now, as the law stands, right now, which is, to be frank, it's really, the law before 2020, because obviously everything changed in 2020. So the law before 2020 says if an employer just unilaterally changes an employee's salary, let's say you're forced to cut everyone's pay by 50%, that's a constructive dismissal. So there is a very good chance that there will be plenty of litigation against lots of employers, and dentists are a target as well, because their employees see that they have all this production. They believe that there's all this money coming into the practice. Little do they know the cost of payroll and rent and utilities and sundries and whatnot. So, every employer is going to be a target. So, the guidance that I'm giving to dentists and employers right now are, we have to be careful and, and stay tuned. And, if you're forced to do something, you're forced to lay off an employee, if the college, the Royal College says you cannot operate but for emergency procedures, my feeling is a judge isn't really going to hold that against an employer when they were forced to close. They were forced to reduce their revenue, their production by, 60, 70, 80, 100%. So there are a lot of unknowns. I mean, we can go into more detail about that later, but in terms of, and then, so when we're talking about bringing employees back, again, we do it carefully, A, and B, how do you know which employees to bring back and when? Really,
that was my next question. Like, can you do it one at a time or whatever? Can you phase it?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, you can. And I think there are proper ways to do it, proper ways to communicate that to all of the team. And, the other thing I would say, briefly is there are always human rights concerns that you want to keep in mind. So, you want to make sure that you're not targeting certain employees and, or not targeting other employees or having a preference for certain employees based on a certain human rights ground and not.
Okay, so question as far as that's concerned, from the employee's perspective, leading up to this, I know there was the law that if you felt you were in danger going into your workplace, you couldn't be forced to go back, you couldn't be fired. Now, I know we're not going to get a flood of green light when we go back, but we'll get that soft green as we start to scale up again. Employers are inviting employees to come back. At that point, if an employee says they don't want to come back in fear for their health and safety, where does that put the dentist and the employer?
So this is, probably the second most popular topic I've been talking with dentists and employers. So that has to do with refusing unsafe work. And I can tell you, I can go over it briefly here. There's a lot more detail that I can probably go into, and we can talk about later about what is unsafe work, and can an employee refuse anything they think is unsafe. So the short answer is, an employee has a right to refuse unsafe work, but they have to have, it's not just what they think is unsafe. There's a legal test for what would be considered safe, what is considered not safe. At the same time, okay, the law is clear. The employer has to take every reasonable precaution in the circumstances to protect their workers. What does that mean? Well, I think it's different for every employer. It's different for every practice. It's different for, and the specific employee. So we can dig into those details later, but, there's unsafe work. Yeah, there's refusing unsafe work. And listen, I've already helped some employers where their employees have said, I think the work is unsafe, and it's been deemed not to be unsafe. Like, no, the work is safe. You're being protected. Go to work. So we can talk about, what those employers did to protect themselves and how they got around, navigating work refusals.
Okay.
So have you got anything from the RCDS that dictates what that safe workplace needs to look like going back yet? Because I imagine you're getting 1,000 emails from the Old Boys Club every day.
I'm not getting anything.
Well, here's what I would say about
that. They're giving us the silent treatment.
Yeah. Here's what I would say about that. Out of all of the different employers I work for, dentists are the experts in IPAC. I mean, the stop signs that we know every dental office has had for years now. Now we're seeing those stop signs, stop if you have a fever, if you have a new fever, a new cough, stop. Now we see those signs everywhere. So dentists are way ahead of the curve when it comes to being prepared and how to deal with IPAC procedures. I mean, it's their job. It's your duty. It's your obligation to know about how to protect yourself. So I think dentists are well positioned to know what is reasonable, how to protect their workers. Like they're already set. So the details of that, of course, the devil's always in the details. We could talk about that later. And I think dentists are really well prepared to deal with coming back to work, a soft open, and then a full open of their practice.
Jonathan, I just want to stop you because a lot of amazing information, and we're trying to pack as much as we can into this sort of introductory video of employment law and the state of employment law in Canada right now. So I think it'd be best if we did a live webinar, guys, and Agatha, they could register through UPB. You could put that information out.
Yeah,
And
we'll
Jonathan,
you can get more details and have your questions answered.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll be posting information on how to register for that.
yeah, so Jonathan, if you're cool with that, we'll do this and get some of the stuff out that we were talking about, and then let's do a live webinar for these people, because that interaction, I'm sure there's a lot more questions than we're touching on today.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, well, I've got another question. What if, like, moving forward, let's say we are limited to, seeing X number of patients a day, or spacing them out, or so many in the waiting room? Like, there's a real good possibility that's going to be an issue. So what if I want to change the way I work, the structure that I work, the hours? Like, how does that come into play when my staff has been used to working, certain number of days, certain number of hours?
Right. So where there is, first of all, you have to look to what your contract says. Okay. If you have written employment contracts with your team. And so you can look at
that. They specify.
Yeah, so you can look at that, and if there's a way to amend the contract, built into that contract, then it's easy. But I know a lot of dentists don't have written contracts with their team.
That's true.
So in that case, it's risky, and you have to do that carefully. It's not impossible to do, and it's something I help dentists do all the time. And so it's risky, but B, there's also that interesting interaction with, if an employee is still laid off, and maybe you might not necessarily be changing their hours, maybe it's just a slow re-entry back to work. So you're still on layoff, and but you can still do some work, and so that's possible. So with layoffs, there's a little more detail we can go into, but there's a shorter layoff and a longer layoff. But just because an employee's laid off doesn't mean they can't temporarily come back to work.
Oh, interesting.
So because a layoff is when there isn't any work. But if the employer says, I have work for this week or this day for you to do, or typically it's within a week, that's possible for an employer to do. So in implementing that, maybe you bring back an employee for 1 week and you bring back another employee for another week. I mean, that's just one possible way.
I didn't know you could do that. That's like actually something that is really important to get out to a lot of dentists, because I think that's one of the struggles that we're all having is like, how do we do it? Who do we bring back first? Can we do part-time for everybody instead of having so that's actually a really good thing to know, that you can, with some guidance from a lawyer like you, actually put that into play and do it properly.
Yeah, and there's lots of different. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Jumping in again. When does a layoff, when it's been consecutive, evolve into what might be considered a dismissal? So if this thing went on for months, and I know doctors are thinking this all the time, say it went past that 13, 16 week, I don't know exactly what it is there at any point now, or is the law going to be blanket changed to accommodate all this fluctuation of the unknown?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So as the law stands right now, there is no such thing as a permanent layoff. All layoffs are temporary. And to be really brief, there's a shorter layoff and a longer layoff. The shorter layoff is 13 weeks within a 20-week period, okay? A longer layoff is 35 weeks off, right? 13 weeks off, or 35 weeks off within a 52-week period. So what you can see there, that's where the government and employment law builds in the ability for the employer to bring back an employee for 1 week or 2 weeks and say, okay, well, there's not enough work for you right now, so we're putting you back on layoff. And that's a really interesting question you brought up, Mark, because that's as the law stands right now. Okay.
That'll change tomorrow.
I mean, the law, as we've already talked about, the law and policies and programs are changing at breakneck speed. So there's nothing stopping the government from, in the future, protecting employers from some future liability that may come up. The government, there's so many different options and levers that the government can pull, the provincial government and the federal government. For example, the provincial government could change employment law to say, if you were laid off as a result of COVID, it's not a termination. That's something that's within their power. The government could also say, and these are just really, I'm just spitballing, and this is, I think, the best part about these type of conversations. The government could also say, if you were terminated as a result, or if you were laid off as a result of COVID, maybe this is the maximum amount that you could claim as for wrongful dismissal against your employer.
Okay.
The government could also say, we have the Human Rights Tribunal. The government could say, we're going to create a separate COVID tribunal related to, employment law claims or personal injury claims. And they could also set maximums on what people could obtain there. So there is so much that is unknown, right, about the situation. The law is right now, what it was before 2019. There were some immediate changes that the provincial government made to employment law, but, there's a lot of unknowns of what could happen in the future. So I think what's best for dentists to do is to, do what's right for the business. Prepare for the worst, but be hopeful for the best. And of course, get advice from your lawyers and accountants and, leadership coaches, because we're going to get through this. It's going to be a little bumpy on the way, but we're going to get through it. And I think dentists are going to be fine.
That's coming from an employment lawyer. That's a good piece of information to leave on. Where are you going first, to the dentist or to get your haircut, Jonathan?
That's a good point. I think, my hair is it's pretty long right now. I need a cut. You can see more of the gray hair coming here. But yeah, okay. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Priorities.
Yeah. But like I said, I think dentists are going to be okay, because, people have been at home for so long. We're eating a lot of Easter chocolate. We are drinking a lot of wine. I don't know about you. I'm drinking a lot of wine. So
this is not coffee.
He's sipping from the glass behind him on that virtual screen that he's using.
Yeah, right. But I think, people, once we have the soft opening and the full reopening of the society and the economy, I think people are really going to prioritize their appearance, and that includes the dentist. So I think, people have been drinking so much red wine and beer and coffee at home. They're going to need their teeth cleaned. They're going to need their teeth whitened. So yeah. I think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I say, eat lots of chocolate. All the Easter chocolate, it's been discounted. Go ahead. Have another glass of red wine.
The LCBO was open.
That's right.
Jonathan, I really appreciate your energy and your optimism and the insight that you've given us today. I know a lot of these questions, Dr. Bis and I have been batting back and forth, and myself out coaching in the dental community at large. Agatha, thank you as always for your awesome personality, your great insight as well.
Notice I didn't stop you once today.
I know. That's why I want to end it now. I'm going out without being
Good call.
Go out on a high note.
Without being scolded today. So from UPB Dental Academy, Jonathan Borrelli, employment lawyer, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you on the live webinar. Agatha, you'll get that information out for everybody.
I'll get it out, and I'll get Jonathan's contact info if anybody wants to get in touch with him right now. And we'll do a more detailed live call-in show, so stay tuned for that. And check us out at UPB Dental Academy if you want to know more information. Have a good one.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I want to go right away to the dentist. This is the COVID tan. I have the COVID tan. We're all going to have it. That's what it is.
I'm so glad I'm recording still.
Great.